G'day there, everyone. My name's Aaron, and I'm joining you live from a sultry lair of Doctor Who merchandise in Ashburton. This is my co-host, Greg. How are you doing tonight, mate?
G'day, Aaron. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. Weather's a bit warmer, but muggy.
It's one of those things when you live in Melbourne, you even complain about it being too cold or you complain about it being too hot. But it's one of those things we probably do as chit chat at the start of every episode. But we should just get into things today because we've got a lot of stuff to discuss. This is the Who report, and here we go. So, it's been a big news week this week, and I think it's going to be a lot of news from now on. Now, Russell T Davies and Disney have taken over the reins of Doctor Who, and things have started to change straight away. And the current issue of Doctor Who magazine, which is only really a week out from the reveal of the new logo and generally that David Tennant is the 14th Doctor, has totally regenerated itself. And we've got the first issue under the new leadership of Russell T Davies, and a lot of things have changed. Now, I've got to say this up front because I know some people get the magazine and in Australia it hasn't arrived yet, but we are going to be talking about stuff and content from the current issue that only came out today. So if you're someone who likes to read all of that information when you get it yourself, we will be talking about spoilers, as in production spoilers, what's in the magazine, and also comic book and story spoilers within the magazine itself. Have you had a chance, Greg, to look at the regenerated version of Doctor Who magazine yet?
Not yet, other than I've seen the cover there, and doesn't that look quite nice, particularly with the new diamond logo?
It was one of those things where you get a pang of nostalgia, and Doctor Who magazine started with the weekly with the diamond logo and went to other logos, and then when the series ended, it went back to the diamond logo, and we've had when I mean the series ended in 1989, we went back to the diamond logo, and then we've had a lot of other logos, and being the diamond anniversary, they've gone back to it. We don't know if that will just be for a year or it will continue on when David Tennant moves on. Now, before we get into things, I can see a bouffant on your t-shirt. Now, is that Winky Dink from Come On Kids?
I should do a t-shirt reveal. So this is what I'm wearing at the moment.
That's fantastic. So that's, of course, the third Doctor, and it's got 3 written in Dalek font down the side there, which is pretty cool. So we're going to have a look at the regenerated Doctor Who magazine. And news has been hitting thick and fast. And this is some of the news that has come out this week with the production notes and what's going on. And Russell T Davies has confirmed a few things. Did you have a look at this and see some of the old names coming back?
Not in a great detail, but isn't it interesting how we are now suddenly getting all this rush of information? It's like it's like Doctor Who's been given a new lease of life, I guess, and with Russell T Davies doing his thing.
It is one of those things where I think Russell T Davies has a very good grasp of what excites fans and keeps the show going. And
Yeah.
I've spoken to a couple of people today who've excitedly been texting me and messaging me, kind of going, Doctor Who magazine has regenerated. Oh my goodness, it's like enthusiastic again, and it's got news in it again. One of the things that probably has been lacking for the last few years is actual production notes and anyone from the production team actually giving Doctor Who magazine exclusive stories and confirming things in the pages of the magazine. And it's the way, I guess, information dissemination has changed, where everyone turns to the internet for stuff. And I did forget the first time round, Russell T Davies did try to give exclusives and first looks and things like that to Doctor Who magazine. And I guess it's a good way to reward buyers and subscribers who might get stuff that they don't see on Facebook or on Twitter or anywhere else first.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. It makes sense, and well, you may as well do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of facts up there. We'll go through them just quickly. Russell T Davies is back as showrunner. You've got Joel Collins, a name I don't really know, but Phil Collison's back, and Julie Gardner and Jane Tranter, and they were the dream team behind Doctor Who coming back in 2005. So it's really exciting to see those names. And then we've got the confirmation of the directors for the specials. And again, we've got Rachel Talalay, who I think is Australian and has directed some of my favourite episodes, including World Enough and Time. So, yeah, hopefully we get proper releases of publicity pics now too. I think that is one of the things that has really been disappointing. And you do think Russell T Davies started off the magazine like this, and it really was exciting, and there really were a lot of revelations. And when Stephen Moffat took over, there was still sort of production notes, but it got less and less. And I don't blame them. I kind of feel like the pressure of producing the show meant there was less time to do all the other bits and pieces. But it is disappointing, I think, the last couple of years when we had lockdowns and when we had shortened seasons because of that, that it took other people to do watch-alongs and give exclusive sort of things to the magazine rather than the production crew, who you would think if they're not doing anything, it should have been the best time ever for them doing stories, behind the scenes, facts and fiction, and all of that for fans who aren't going to have anything. So it is exciting, and it has been absolutely amazing the last week or two. And I don't know if you've noticed it, just how Doctor Who fandom has turned a corner, and there seems a lot more positivity across all the boards and across everyone than there has been for quite a long time.
Yeah, no, and I think that's probably what Doctor Who needs now, is a level of positivity that perhaps we haven't had for a while. And I'm sure Russell T Davies will be very pleased with that.
Yeah, I think the thing is, you can't please everyone all the time, but I've definitely seen the last few weeks the majority of people seem to be happy rather than the minority. So we'll see how long that holds, because traditionally you can't keep Doctor Who fans happy for that long. So if we go to the next slide, we've got it's been a week before shows, but so much news has been coming out. This almost seems like old news, but it's not. This came out after our last show. The budget's been tripled, and everyone's been talking about that. It was originally sort of a rumor, but it has pretty much been confirmed. £100 million budget in the new deal. We go from zero to heaps of info now compared to the last few years. Thank goodness. Hopefully, it will invigorate fandom again. I totally agree with you, Mark. So have you been seeing all this news about Disney taking over?
Indeed, and isn't this, and in fact, this new information about how much per episode, that's all quite interesting, isn't it? I think Doctor Who's getting more money than it's ever had before to make episodes.
Well, the thing is, I have been a critic of the new series, not because I think I can justify all the criticisms I have by explaining why. But one of the things I can't say that I saw was Doctor Who looking cheap through the Chibnall era. It did look like a good show. So getting a huge cash injection, it might do more for more epic stories and different things that they had to budget down before. But I don't think in this era that it did look cheap. So where the budget goes, if it's on guest stars from overseas that usually they couldn't get, or if it's on location filming and things like that, it is one of those things. It'll be interesting to see where it goes, or if it's just on publicity.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's not like the show's been looking cheap or bad in that respect so far. So indeed, it will be very interesting to see where the money goes, and whether we do actually see that somehow.
Old season budget now goes for each episode. I have to say, I said to someone, oh, guess what? Doctor Who's going from a budget for £10 million a season to £100 million. And they said the budget for Doctor Who was £10 million a season. Chris Chibnall's been embezzling £6 million a year. It's the Americans who have the money, and the new Doctor Who ain't cheap anyway, regardless. That's absolutely true. That's a comment from Phil Nichols, the president of the Doctor Who Club of Victoria. So I think if we go to the next slide, we do talk about where would you direct the budget? So this is a kind of fun game Greg and I are going to have. And if you want to throw in your own comments as well, we're quite happy to see if you come up with anything we would think was different. I've put a couple of things up there. Will it go to publicity, special effects, big name actors, location filming, bring back old characters with CGI? There's a whole lot of things on the table. Had you thought, if there was an basically unlimited budget is what it's getting compared to what it had, what would you love to see in new Doctor Who?
Well, I'm looking at those and thinking about it. Perhaps the one area there that might be good would be to get some big name actors in there. I mean, as we just mentioned, things like special effects, I suppose I can put more toward making them more epic and more spectacular, but it's not like they're particularly bad at the moment.
No.
But I can imagine that perhaps some big name actors might be where some of that money would go.
One of the things that I would really like to see is some really fantastic monsters, maybe using prosthetics and sort of the next level to what we're getting now. Because I do think if you think about the Chibnall era, if I said to you, what was the best monster, not an old recurring one, or what was the best villain, there aren't many that stand out, but more shooting in America is what will happen. I don't know. I think one of the charms about Doctor Who, it's quintessentially British, and I think the Americans realize that. And I don't think they'd want to change the balance too much. I mean, we might get like what JNT had and did American Companion to sort of, have that American component to it. We might get some stuff filmed in America, but I can imagine it being more like Daleks in Manhattan and things like that, where it doesn't overrun the show. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, I think I would love to see some really amazing sort of Geiger level monsters or Predator alien type monsters that you can say, wow, there is a new classic monster in Doctor Who that is up there with anything that's been in the past, because I can't really think of too much even before the Chibnall era that you could say, it goes into the pantheon of best monsters ever. Maybe the Weeping Angels. I'm not sure. Is that something you thought about?
But you're right. Yeah, if getting, I guess, motion picture level creatures, things that we might expect to see at the movies, would be good. Like you're saying, creatures that actually look particularly spectacular.
If you take a look at the budget and you were to do something that would be motion picture and it was still CG, you'd go from having sort of the Lazarus experiment monster, which doesn't really work, but if it had unlimited budget, you might go to something that was CG in some of the Harry Potter movies or things like that, where the actual execution of the monsters isn't let down by the limitations of the budget and the effects house and the time. Let's hope they don't try too hard to be British like in the US and stuff up. I think that's what I was saying. I think they won't do that. I think they realize that the show will be British and stay that way, and it might have guest actors. So, if you've heard of it, the thing that I think, there's a few American actors that once in a while drop that, do you know, I'd love to be in Doctor Who, but they never ever were, because they're never going to get American actors from that sort of pay grade to do it unless they were really fans. Now you might get people, I don't know, like Tom Hanks has once said Doctor Who was a great show, and there's a couple of other ones. I don't know if he'd do it, but you never know. All bets are off is what I can say now, and we might get some amazing new monsters. And as Shane was saying, we might get some remote locations, either to represent alien planets, which I do think adds a lot if you can actually go to a location. In the recent era where they went to South Africa and some of the other places, it really did look different and look alien. And then the publicity as well. I'm sure a big chunk of this budget will go to publicity, because if Disney is spending that much money, they don't want to spend it to just capture the low audience that they've got. I would be very surprised if they don't trumpet Doctor Who for this whole year. And when it comes back, the ratings, I think they would want them to at least double what they are now. And the downloads on Disney Plus, who knows where that goes. And it's a very different. Whoopi Goldberg wants to be in it. See, that's the type of thing that could happen now. I just what I do hope is you don't get everyone who wants to be in it in the first season and it does overload it. Well, it is a fan-orientated show, and the new Doctor Who is better for better or for worse. Doctor Who has regenerated its format many times over the years. I don't think this is the worst step that's ever happened, but it'll take a bit of time, and it might be a bit of a shock when we see it. Would love to see the Time War done cinematically. Now, that is something that would be absolutely brilliant. If they did go back and do Paul McGann pre-Time War, leading up to the Time War, epic Gallifrey. That would be something I would absolutely love. You put the budget in that, and you could see the budget on the screen, kind of thing.
That and that gets us into like the spin-off thing, doesn't it? I mean, that could be a whole spin-off thing.
It does. So that was the next thing we were going to take a look at. What if you were Disney? What spin-off would you do? And there is endless speculation as to what you would do if you're in charge of Doctor Who. Would you do the Paternoster Gang? Would you do another Sarah Jane Adventures with a different companion? Would you go back to previous Doctors? Would you do a spin-off where you have another Doctor at the same time as the current parent show, and then it ends up with they merge or they never merge at all? I mean, the situations are unlimited, really, and we've seen what they've done with Marvel and the Marvel universe. Basically, they've said, we like this character, so we're giving them a 6-episode show, and it might just be one season. So I can imagine a lot of things. The one I would love is you've seen this companion support group. Imagine if Graham was running this, and any companion could be their story for the season or their story for an episode, where Graham rings up Joe Grant and says, "You're in Australia at the moment. There's some weird stuff happening in Bondi Beach or something like that," and you have a story with Joe Grant. I mean, if they brought him back for the special, and that was the last 10 minutes, which Russell T Davies wrote, again, I would think he was doing that with a plan. And you've got a whole host of companions, and let's face it, Doctor Who is a lot of actors' pension plan. So have you thought about any of the sequels or spin-offs you'd like to see?
Yeah. Well, I've never been a particularly big fan of the spin-offs. So the likes of Class and Sarah Jane Adventures, really not getting into those, unfortunately. But I think if they were to do something like get Paul McGann in and actually do a series with him, for example, that would be something that I would be very interested to see. And indeed, as we just talked about, maybe something, well, it might be the Paul McGann thing, something that concentrates on the Time War and looks at something that happened in that time. That sort of thing, I think, would be awesome as a spin-off. I would be less excited about some of the other things, like what they try to do with Class and stuff like that.
How is this for a spin-off? Death Games on Gallifrey. You don't have the Doctor in it. You have, like Marvel have just done a fantastic hour special, Werewolf by Night, which was kind of the darker side of Marvel. Imagine if they just did an hour special on what happened in the Death Zone in Gallifrey, and you had the Time Lords, maybe ones we know from the past, or maybe just no one at all, and you have them time scooping all your favorite monsters into one episode, maybe 6 different monsters, putting them in different areas, and you see them all fighting it out. Just something like that is an amazing special. I think would be like, there wouldn't be many fans that would say, "Oh no, I don't want to see the Autons go up against the Krynoid," or something like that. You know, it'd be pretty cool.
I like it.
So,
and you mentioned the Krynoid, so that's a thumbs up for me.
So there's a lot of potential. The other thing I was mentioning to someone else, Tom Baker has done Disney voices. He's been in Rebels as one of the creatures in that. They could do a sort of Rebels style animation of a new Tom Baker series or something like that. So it's CGI. You've got a lot of people who are into Clone Wars and Rebels and the Bad Batch, and there's a big enough audience that would be used to seeing that. It wouldn't be too jarring, because there's a lot of science fiction shows that go that way. Imagine having a new series with Tom Baker and Leela or something like that. It's just animated.
And that would be awesome. And what do you think, though? Of course, I think in the past the BBC have been reluctant to do anything outside of the main Doctor, so that it didn't distract from the main Doctor. But with Disney, do you think, while you've got the current series going, would they be okay doing an animated of the Tom Baker era or something like that at the same time? I mean, I'd be watching it all. It wouldn't worry me. It wouldn't distract me.
I think they would, and I think the key to that is Russell T Davies, before he came back 2 or 3 years ago now, said Star Trek has got this expanded universe with all these different shows, and there's animations, and there's CG, and there's 3 or 4 core shows going. Wouldn't it be lovely if Doctor Who could do something like that? I like the
Mm.
idea of Disney offering the effects studio that did the de-aging of Luke Skywalker and Boba Fett, classic Doctor Who de-aged. I don't know, like that would, I think that would work with some. I think you could do it with Peter Davison because he's got a very, as Terence Dick said, open face. But when you get de-aging of someone, oh, I don't know. I'd have to be sold by seeing it, I guess, because I didn't. I thought it was great. Luke came back, but I could still tell it wasn't Mark Hamill. It was a de-aged version of another actor with Mark Hamill sort of over the top. I don't mind. I think that's great. I mean, I thought it was amazing, but I don't know if a series could sustain it as the highlight of an episode for a couple of scenes. I think that's absolutely fantastic, and we've kind of had that in the Power of the Doctor. But doing an entire series would be very expensive, and would it be too much uncanny valley to watch a lead actor for an entire series? I don't know if it's actually been done. We've had Tarkin in Star Wars and Carrie Fisher, but they're all sort of major scenes where everyone's like, wow, and they're gone before everyone goes, oh, maybe it didn't look so great. But if you had a whole Doctor 6-part story or something with the lead actor, a de-aged version of one of the Doctors, I don't know how that would work. It might be jarring. It might be freaking amazing. Who knows?
That's where animated would get around that. You could have any of the old Doctors, and it would work.
Yeah, it was too expensive for complete series. It would have to be a cameo. I think we're into the budget range now where you could have a sort of a major cameo, not just a cameo at the end. But it'll be really interesting to see what they do. The one thing that I'm very sure everyone who's stuck through Doctor Who is more excited now and very excited to see where it goes. And I'm very open to what anything Disney does. And I do have to say, there have been announcements that I have thought, oh, that don't sound so good for other shows, spin-offs. And when I've seen them, they've been some of the best stuff that's come out of the franchise. So before everyone judges Disney as like destroying Doctor Who or Americanizing it, let's see what they do with it first.
And absolutely, that's what I've been thinking too. I see a bit of commentary negatively about the fact that Disney's involved, but quite frankly, we don't know what's going to happen, and until we see it, it's just pure speculation. And any of the bad stuff that some people come up with or suggest, it might not happen. It probably won't happen.
I trust Russell T Davies. I'm sure this deal has been percolating for a couple of years, and I absolutely trust Russell T Davies that the core show at the very least will retain very much the essence of Doctor Who. And any of the other shows, I guess you don't have to watch. I mean, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan, and I didn't get through to the end of Class or that Canine show. So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Same here. So exactly, the core show will still be there. We don't have to watch the other stuff if we don't like it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's exciting news. We're moving on now. This is the spoilers I was talking about, which this is an amazing rejuvenation for Doctor Who magazine, and this is the first time they have ever done this. The end of the Power of the Doctor continues directly on into the comic strip. So they are not going to show this on screen, and they are doing a year's story in the Doctor Who magazine in the comic strip that dovetails into the next special. So you are going to get a year of new David Tennant stories in Doctor Who magazine that then dovetails to the special. And the other thing, which I think is amazing, they've paid for the rights to the Daleks, and Doctor Who magazine is having the Daleks in the comic strip for the first time in 20 years, which is absolutely amazing to see. So you can see the first frame starts on the top of the hill where the Doctor regenerated, and you're going to get all the explanations about why he's regenerated, like how he's back as it's going to be in the comic, which is genius to get people to buy the comic and go back to Doctor Who magazine. It has been one of those things where even in the magazine they say we've kind of run parallel to whoever was the Doctor and what was happening in the series. We have never had a cliffhanger in the series that goes back to the comic. And this is very interesting for me because we kind of know the first story of the Doctor Who special, from behind the scenes pictures, and this is spoilers, it looks like it's Beep the Meep from the very first issue of Doctor Who Weekly. So how would that be for one of those timey-wimey things where Doctor Who magazine jumps the story from the pages to the pages of the comic strip from the series goes all the way through, and then the Doctor has another run in the comic with Beep the Meep, and that then jumps back to the live action series. I mean, this is Celestial Toymaker, the Land of Fiction, all of that stuff is back on the table. Even I think there was the Stockbridge Horror, and was it Astrabalus or one of the villains in the Doctor Who magazine? Imagine if, rather than a returning villain from the series, they were pulling the villain from the magazine, and it's from the Colin Baker era, but it's recognized as one of the best runs of stories they did in the magazine. So again, I'm super excited, to the point where I'm like, probably going to have to start buying Doctor Who magazine again. so it definitely has worked what they've done. I hope everyone's excited about it.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. I wasn't aware of this. Yeah, that's amazing. I want to see that comic strip.
Well, that's the thing. All this, I put most of the slides together for the show, and I had a whole lot done, and I just had to scrap it because all this stuff was coming out just today as the magazine dropped. So I've had people going, "Oh my goodness, this is happening in the magazine. Oh, they've announced this. Oh, this is amazing." So there is a massive positive wave of energy about Doctor Who at the moment. That's really nice to sort of see happening.
Yeah, no, that's amazing.
So we're kind of jumping over to the Web of Fear, and the Web of Fear is where we look at what's going on around the web, and some of it again seems very old because this has been a very busy week in news for Doctor Who. But the Web of Fear is just the commentary the fans are giving on some of the major events and some of the things that are happening in the Doctor Who world, particularly on the internet. So this was what dropped earlier in the week, and I guess all the revelations in Doctor Who magazine are to do with this. Next week could, if everything falls into place, be a very busy week for TV news. Now, this is interesting because I don't know how accurate or what it's going to be, but lots of people picked up on this and said, oh, it's incoming embargoes, and I'm thinking it'll be the new companion announced. Yeah, I've got that twice. Sorry about that. I think there'll be the new companion announced. I think someone else said Shooty is starting filming this week, so it might be his costume is announced. And then I've had other people speculating it could be missing episodes. The one thing that's interesting, when TV Zone announce something, they usually put, this is not about Doctor Who, because if they announce something like that, everyone presumes it's going to be Doctor Who news. And when it isn't, it disappoints people. This time they have not put, this is not about Doctor Who. And I don't think any of the stuff that's revealed in the magazine has been a busy week for television. So we've still got a few days to see if there's any news dropped about the series online. But there's a lot of excitement at the moment as to what it could be. Have you heard about this?
No, I was just looking at the date though, the 6th. So we are well into the week from that date, aren't we? And
yeah, we are.
I wonder what it is. Yeah.
So we don't know yet, but there we go. So if we go to the next slide, I do love a doctor in a robe. This was tweeted by Sophie Aldred with some fantastic behind the scenes pictures there. Did you want to go through and read some of the replies?
Let me read. So Elf on a Shelf. Now you've seen docs in frocks. I like that. James says, where's Peter Davison and Paul McGann? I guess they just weren't there when that photo was taken.
Yeah.
And the last one there from the doctor's care home. Yeah.
So that's a bit of a comment on the age. I wasn't sure when I saw the episode if they all filmed at the same time or if they all came onto set separately, or indeed if Sophie was there when they were filming the scenes with the doctors. And apparently she wasn't when she was filming her scene, but she went and surprised Doctor Who. She went and surprised Sylvester McCoy and read against him for his scenes. So he had her to act off, which would have been, a lovely experience for both of them.
Very good. Yeah.
So this again is all about the regeneration of Doctor Who magazine. And of course, we're getting news about the digital copies first, because in Australia we get it a few weeks later. So we've talked about it coming back. There's a couple of comments.
Let me read the short one there. So Doctor Who Online, OMG, the new issue of Doctor Who Monthly has taken us right back to the 1990s. Love the new, old logo and this new era for the magazine too.
Yeah, so as we were saying, we are not paid by Doctor Who magazine to spruik it, but it's very positive at the moment. There's another one on the side there from Edwin, who's one of my friends locally. Did you want to maybe quickly read that too?
A good read this month. You can tell it's a new era. This issue exudes enthusiasm for the show, new series, something it seemed to lack lately. Must be RTD. The whole comic strip tie-in is genius. Brings Doctor Who Monthly to another level. I'm sure this will bring in new readers, something Doctor Who Monthly needs. Sorry, Doctor Who Magazine.
Yes. Well, the thing is, I might have said before, I've only been getting maybe merchandise specials, or when they give you a special issue that gives a piece of a Target book or something like that. And I'm definitely in the boat where I'm like, now I'm probably going to have to get the magazine and read it monthly again. So worked on me, whatever they're doing.
And I'm in the same boat. I used to subscribe years ago. I eventually stopped that. And apart from giving the occasional special here and there, I really haven't. I certainly haven't been getting physical copies, and maybe seen the odd thing online, but that's all. But now with what we're seeing tonight, I might have to consider getting it again myself.
One of the crazy things is Minotaur Books just stopped getting Doctor Who magazine. So Minotaur Books is one of the big sci-fi bookshops in Melbourne, and their subscribers a couple of months ago said we're finally stopping getting it. It's just not worth it. So maybe they'll change their mind now.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And of course, there is some controversy in the pages of Doctor Who magazine. I'll quickly read the little article, and if you want to read some of the responses, Russell T Davies has talked about why David Tennant regenerated and his clothes changed. And I won't read it all. It's just basically he didn't think the Doctor being in woman's clothes would be good, because that would be all the tabloids would sort of concentrate on, rather than, David Tennant, and it will be cross-dressing doctor kind of thing. And it's caused some interesting already responses from the readership.
So Starhooving says Jodie Bot's up in flames over RTD not wanting David Tennant to regenerate into Jodie Whittaker's genderless clown costume.
Yes.
God, I love this man.
So that's interesting, because that really is firing shocks across the bowels of fandom already, where we already have a lot of gender issues and people who get on one side or the other. But for balance, there's a couple of other comments there.
So Hemkin says, wow, what a nice thing to say about every male /taller/broader 13 cosplayer.
It's interesting because Russell T Davies said he didn't want David Tennant to regenerate into those clothes because he's 6'4", a lot taller than Jodie, and it would look ridiculous. I think if you were a 6'4" cosplayer, you would actually make clothes the appropriate size. So I don't think that one is a particular big issue.
So what do you think about that? I was surprised. I'm disappointed. I have to admit, I don't see why there would be a problem with David Tennant in the previous Doctor's outfit. It's not like it's not like a ball gown or a dress. Not that would even worry me. It's fairly genderless.
Particularly because the Master just wore it fine in that very episode, and it wasn't an issue at all. I do have to say, when the Master wore all the Doctor's old outfits and Jodie came back and was sort of wearing that, I was going, oh gee, I hope she stays in this for the rest of the episode, because it's kind of cool. I wouldn't have thought it was an issue for me at all. It's not one of those things I would have even thought about. I guess it just shows when you're doing publicity and television, you have to second guess everything. I think for Russell T Davies, it was a case of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
I would still hope that there might be some in-show reference to that and some sort of explanation. That would work. I'll have to read the comic now to see if the new Doctor makes some reference to the fact that he's suddenly got new clothes on.
Yes, so I guess we'll have to see. I don't know if that's in it. I've only seen the first and last page of the comic strip, so I haven't read it myself yet.
Mm.
And this is a more of a local story. One of the comments there is actually from you. Did you want to go through this one, mate?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a story about one of our friends of the Bendigo Hoovian Society, Michael O'Neill. So Michael has said, "Here's my own incarnation of the Doctor in my own cosplay. I hope you are all enjoying my written Doctor Who adventures." And my comment to him was, "Fantastic, and what a great idea to have a cosplay of your own version of the Doctor." And Michael says, "My next Doctor Who adventure is based on a best-selling sci-fi novel." So Michael, as we saw a few episodes ago, not only has the outfits of just about all the TV Doctors, he's made his own version of the Doctor. And each month he actually posts in the Bendigo Hoovians and the Doctor Who Club of Victoria groups little adventures that he's basically involved in. It's him as the Doctor in these adventures, and he's been doing that now for quite a long time. It's actually quite good. I don't think I've seen anyone else, certainly locally,
Do that.
doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He's doing an amazing job. It's quite good fun.
Well, it sounds like he's a big cheese in the Bega Hoovians. So, okay, we're going on to the destruction of time, where we look at all the news and sometimes no news at all, but looking back at some of the missing episodes. Now, there's been a couple of interesting comments the last 2 days, and I haven't been on top of it, but I've been reading it interestingly. They were tweeted and put online by Ian Levine, who has been a long-time fan and has, for most of his life, done as much as he can to preserve and find missing Doctor Who. He is sometimes a controversial figure in Doctor Who fandom, but we won't go into any of that. We'll look at what he posted this week, and what I have done is quite a lot of comments, so I've put it into point forms. This was on Gallifrey Base, and it was something that he saw on Facebook, and it's about the restoration of missing episodes. So he's just saying this is from a person named Brendan Shepherd, who posted on Facebook, and it's fairly self-explanatory. If we could go to the next slide. So it was quite a long post, and I've just put the bullet points down, and this is apparently what happened in the last couple of days. So I went to a meeting this morning with BBC Marketing, Doctor Who brand team, and Disney. The project was to use deepfake technology to reconstruct an episode of Doctor Who. We showed them a 2-minute clip of Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines and the servo robot from Wheel in Space. So there's been lots of reconstruction of missing Doctor Who in the past, but no one, I think, has used deepfake technology. And that is basically where they map out the face of actors. And we were talking about this earlier with what they did with Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian. And then they get another actor to do the acting, but they map the face of the original over the top. So looking at refilming actual Doctor Who episodes using deepfake technology, which opens a big can of worms on, whether they should do it, what the quality would be, how it would look, but something that's an interesting possibility nevertheless.
Yes. Could it be? Could it be? I don't know about a whole story, but maybe a way to fill in gaps here and there.
I think they're talking about doing the missing episodes of Wheel in Space this way.
Right.
We showed them a practical demo in VR virtual reality of walking around the set and the studio during the recording of Wheel in Space. So they've set up a virtual space with virtual actors and shown them in real time. I even got Patrick Troughton himself, or an avatar of him, I guess it would have to be, to ask the BBC to help bring back his era to life. And the meeting lasted an hour and 13 face-to-face and was very productive. Now, that all sounds pretty interesting. What did you think when you read this? I don't know if you've read it before I sent the info to you.
No, only when you sent me the information, and that sounded fascinating. We've not heard of this happening, although you see so much on YouTube these days of fans doing things with trying to recreate scenes or episodes, missing episodes. So this sounds like an extension of that to an official sort of level.
Yeah. So interesting. We explained we have a small VR studio and a specialist crew at Pinewood to help us film the material. The last ace up our sleeve, which we had, was we had full funding from an outside source. Should the BBC not wish to fund it? So not only are they not asking for any money, they've got funding and they're just offering it to the BBC, I guess, to get some official status to it or to see if they can officially do the project and move ahead. So it is very, if it's true, it is a very interesting proposal to take to the BBC, especially at this time. And how the BBC reacted actually quite surprised me. So we were told 60th anniversary preparations are complete, and this would not be something that they would want to invest in next year. To distract fans from the celebration by bringing an episode of Doctor Who back to life again, it is not appropriate at this time. Now, I've added the question marks because 50th anniversary, we got the Web of Fear and Enemy of the World, and that was the best freaking thing about the anniversary, in my opinion. So, unless it was a truly terrible reconstruction, I can't see how that would be a bad thing.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. The lost episodes that were found was pretty much the best thing of that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I guess it gets back to what I mentioned earlier about how the BBC though don't like to distract apparently us from the main show. So I guess at the moment the main show is the 60th anniversary, and if they've pretty much sorted it all out or got it all done, perhaps it's understandable that they don't want to add more to it.
Yeah, and of course we don't know if that meeting actually happened at all or if someone having a big wind up too. But I can't understand if there was funding, it apparently looked good, they could do it and they could bring it in on budget. That the BBC would knock it back, but maybe Disney doesn't want to do it if they're doing their own CG, and it wouldn't be up to the standard that they were expecting because they're doing something like that themselves, or indeed if they have some missing episodes up their sleeve so they don't need to do something like that because we could get a nice surprise for the anniversary anyway. But I did think we look at different aspects on the destruction of time segment of this show, and we've looked at recoveries and potential recoveries and recoveries in the past and what's possible in the future. But this is another very interesting avenue, if we weren't going to get the episodes back, of how we could get them remade. I mean, we've had the animations, which I love. Some of them are better than others, but I would rather have them than not have them. And if they're not doing the animations anymore, if there's a cheap alternate that's just as good, I would definitely embrace it, even if it was just for the DVD or Blu-ray releases.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I've enjoyed the animated releases, and would eagerly look forward to anything like this if it was made available.
Yeah, I'd love to see the demo clip so fans can join in on the campaign to get it moving. I would too. I don't know if that'll happen. If they did drop the clip, then at least it would prove what they could do. Ian Levine has been on different forums now and different venues sort of saying, hey, the BBC aren't moving forward with this. Do you think missing episodes are important? Do you think, it's be a distraction? And most of it is positive on, we would love to see this. Yes, go ahead and do it kind of thing. But I guess it's one of those things time will tell.
No, fascinating.
So now we move over to the merchandise portion of the show. Greg and I are both avid collectors and have collected many things over our lives from different eras. And the Braxiatel collection is a Facebook collecting group that I run, and Greg runs one called the Australian Doctor Who action figure page. Check them out and join them if you are interested in collecting, because there is definitely a lot of stuff that happens on both of the pages. Today we're looking at a few different things. This is what I found in the wild this week, which is quite amazing. One of my customers came in and said, I've been going through my garage and I found a whole lot of badges from show bags, and one of them was another Doctor Who show bag badge. And I thought it might be a good way to put the show bag onto the segment, because it is a uniquely Australian item, and show bags are one of those things that are only sold in Australia. I don't think they're sold anywhere else in the world at shows or fairs or anything like that. And the Doctor Who one is very collectible, and it is one of the rarest items of Doctor Who merchandise, and there are not a lot of people that have a complete show bag. I got one when they originally came out at the show. Did you pick one up when they came out?
No. So what year were we talking here? Late
There's
70s?
there's some debate. I think the first year might have been 78 in a paper show bag, and no example of the paper show bag has turned up, even though people kind of remember it. And I think basically the same show bag was released in the early 80s. And I think someone even said they found it maybe at the Bendigo show in 83. So, like a lot of show bags, they get the same bag with different items and they have a different life from show to show. The Doctor Who one seems to be pretty much constant. It started with Tom Baker in the late 70s, was probably around for 2 or 3 years, and then they might have been cleared out from the main shows at regional shows. Now, there's a complete show bag. If you've collecting Doctor Who, there's some interesting items there. There's a tray jigsaw on the left, and that's probably the hardest Doctor Who jigsaw to find. It's even harder than some of the 60s Dalek jigsaws, just because the 60s Dalek jigsaws are expensive, but if you've got the money, you can generally find one. That show bag jigsaw, it just never turns up. It's one of those sort of cheap items from the show that kids would have had used, and when the tray jigsaw loses a couple of pieces, it gets thrown out. So that's a rare jigsaw to find. Probably the hardest item from the show bag to find is the item in the middle there, and that's a put together yourself TARDIS. It's like a cardboard model that you just fold into the TARDIS, and it's a 3D TARDIS with the Doctor. The invisible ink is another hard item to find because a lot of them have leaked or there's no ink in them at all. You just don't know where it went. The invisible ink is very hard to get. A lot of the ink is now just invisible because there's just like little empty bottles. And you can see with a lot of the things at the show, they used images from different merchandise to be cheap, and that's got the Destiny of the Daleks, Andrew Skilleder artwork. And I often think there's no way they paid him for that. They just scanned the Destiny of the Daleks books and used it. But the biggest cheeky one is the one above, which is the little Doctor Who board game, and that is actually a board game that originally appeared on the back of Weetabix boxes in the UK, and they just snatched it and used it as a giveaway game in a show bag, which is amazing and crazy at the same time. Have you had any of these pieces of merchandise in your collection?
Not at all, not at all. And I was thinking about it and asking when these would have come out. I guess there was a time when I wouldn't have been going to shows, and that would certainly be in the late 70s into the 80s. I mean, up until I moved to Melbourne in the early 80s, so I wouldn't have even been to a Melbourne show. But looking at that stuff, I mean, I imagine it's fairly cheap quality, but the artwork there's quite nice, even if some of it is taken from other sources. But I mean, that'd just be a nice collection to have just for the artwork.
It is. It's very evocative of its time, sort of the late 70s, before, I guess, way before they started going over to CG and Photoshop and stuff like that. Ballarat show, late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. So I think it was sold for a couple of years. I think I would have got it in a later show. I can't imagine keeping it from the 70s, but by the 80s, I was definitely collecting Doctor Who. I've had 4 or 5 of them over my time as collectors. They used to turn up, they just do not turn up anymore. I think all the ones that were complete held by collectors are either going to stay in collections forever or were sold to collectors years ago. So that's a really unique Australian item. One of those things you might find on Australian eBay, but is a lot of searching and a lot of just following leads to find stuff, and they do go for a pretty penny too. I've seen just the empty bag go for a couple of $100. Wonderful nostalgic piece to own. Would love to track down the bag itself. Have heard it was sold as late as 84. I think that's about right. I think the last time was 83, 84, because I do remember thinking, why have they still got Tom Baker on it? It should be the new Doctor when I got it. And here's another interesting Australian item. Do you know what you were looking at there, Greg?
Well, only by the streets symbol at the end. I'm guessing it's got something to do with an ice cream.
It is, and this is quite an unusual set of images, and some images that a lot of Doctor Who fans haven't seen. Before Disney got the rights to Doctor Who and possibly animation, Australian animation artists had their own crack at it. And you're absolutely right. This is the 30-second ad for the Streets Ice Cream Doctor Who campaign, which basically tells the story of the Doctor and K9 finding these magnificent ice creams on an alien planet suspended in what looks like crystals, but it's probably meant to be ice. And before they can grab it, one of these aliens turns up that looks exactly like the Doctor, but before you can find out what's happening, it turns into a Necron, which is this giant ice creature that, of course, wants all the Doctor's ice creams. But the ice cream itself, it's hard to see. I thought it was K9 blasted it, but the ice cream itself blasts the monster, obviously not wanting to be eaten by a Necron, and then the Doctor and K9 get the ice creams all to themselves, and that's how it ends. But I think that's actually an amazing lot of art there, and there are some copies of this advert on YouTube, but they're in really poor condition, so you can hardly see what's happening. So that's a nice, clearer version of what actually happens in the ad. Do you remember this ad, and did you ever have Doctor Who ice creams?
That is just awesome. No, I have no memory of that ad, and certainly no memory of the ice creams, unfortunately. But gee, isn't that wonderful? As you say, so there's not really anything the actual ad we can't see, can we? It's not, or they're
I
not.
don't think we can show it on the show. No, so
Yeah.
there is a version on YouTube, but it's so horrible we wouldn't subject our viewers to it.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is another uniquely Australian item. Now I do remember the ads for it at the time, and frustratingly, I never found them locally. I did wonder if it was a regional thing, because I think they came out in about 82. So again, in Australia, we stuck with Tom Baker way after his era. And I was actually actively collecting, and I remember seeing the ad and asking my mum for it, and going to the milk bar and not being able to get it, and going to the supermarket and not being able to get it, and being really frustrated, and then forgetting about it for years and years and years until one turned up on eBay. But I do think, again, it's an amazing piece of Australian history that Doctor Who was popular enough that someone like Streets Ice Cream would get the license and do these Doctor Who chalk ices. And the crazy thing is, there's two variants of the box. There's the original box that came out on the bottom left there, and then just for collectors to make things hard, there's the one with the sticker that says two great stencils in every pack. So there's two different versions of the box, four different stencils, and apparently each of the stencils came in four different colors. So you have to get a whole pack of them, 16 different ones if you want all of them. And good luck on that, because again, they're a very hard item to find.
And again, that's just amazing. That looks fantastic. I certainly don't remember these. Aren't the stencils a great idea? And yeah, this sort of stuff was just Australia, was it? It wasn't.
This was just in Australia. So whoever designed the stencils would have been local. Interestingly, there were stencils for a lot of ice creams and cereals as well. I remember having Snap, Crackle, Pop stencils, and I did the total noob idiot thing to do when I got my set of stencils. I decided I was going to use them to see how they looked, and I used a black texter. And the first one, I'm like, oh, I've just put black texter all over the stencil, and luckily enough, it came off and you couldn't see it. But I just thought, oh, Aaron, sometimes you don't think before you do stuff. Should have just used a pencil. So if you've got stencils, use a pencil.
Good advice.
We're going across now to Mastering eBay, where we look at what has been going on the world's biggest garage sale online, eBay, and some of the other platforms occasionally. And we're starting this week by looking at an item we looked at last week. Now, this was in the Master's Bargain basement last week, where this turned up for $306, 7 bids US. And I said, that is very cheap, because they usually go for, 3 or 4 times that, usually over £1,000 if they're sold in the UK. And this was unusual because it was a rolled one and not a folded one. For people who collect posters, there's a big difference. If it's rolled, it doesn't have creases. Most of these posters for Doctor Who and the Daleks were sent out folded. And so as soon as you see one that was rolled and not folded, you've got to wonder, because apparently the only ones that have turned up unfolded were actually found in the production company who made the movie to be used for their own internal publicity. So it would be incredibly rare to find an unfolded version of this, which is a rare poster anyway. So what do you think happened, Greg?
Yeah, well, it does. It says original there in the description. So what could go wrong?
It
Oh,
was a reproduction. So
oh.
the eBayer that bought it was in a few Doctor Who collectors groups, and when he got it, he put close up pictures, and I think he knew himself anyway when he got it, but he put close up pictures, and it was definitely a reproduction. And this has been one of those posters. I bought one myself for $12 in Minotaur back in the late or mid 90s actually, but it's such a beautiful, colorful poster. It has been reproduced a few times, and there are a few things you can tell. The reproduction isn't as crisp and in focus as the original. And like I said before, all the originals, apart from 3 or 4, are folded. So on eBay, you really do have to do some research and maybe ask some questions and for some close-up photos. But the dramas go on, because maybe if you wanted to read what happened on that post for one of the collectors groups.
So original quad poster problems. Following up on my question about the original 1960s Dalek movie poster, I'm now having problems getting my money back, even after returning the glossy, blurred, rolled poster to the USA at my own cost. Here's the original listing. Does anybody believe this to be an original poster?
Well, no, it's not an original poster. It wouldn't be blurred if it was original, because they were crisp, and the originals are, blown up photos and reproductions, so they're not as crisp. And this is the master's tip of the week, because every week the master will tell us how to help you master eBay. And one of the things with these eBay deals is, it's sometimes you can get your money back really easy, and sometimes it's quite hard. And if the seller digs their feet in and you are ruled against, it is quite hard to get your money back. So the first thing you have to do, you have to go through all the bells and whistles and jump and through the hoops at eBay or PayPal, and if for help. And they should have a process you go through and get your money back. But sometimes it doesn't go right. I have found with dealing with PayPal for another show I do, where I try to get money back for dodgy products. Then if that doesn't work, you can go through your bank or credit card company, but sometimes people don't like doing that. You can get your money back, and the process can again be a bit tricky. But the thing you have to remember, you're dealing with eBay. You're not dealing with the police. You're not dealing with the ultimate authority in global economics or law. You're dealing with a retail company. And the one thing a lot of people don't realize is, if you go to the police and get a stat deck saying, hey, I got this item and it isn't what they said it was, that trumps the person who's trying to sell it and say, oh, no, it is. And eBay will reopen the case, and they will do a reversal, and you will get your money back. Usually what happens, the person who sold it doesn't get their money taken, but the eBay will foot the cost if you go to the trouble of going and get a stat deck. Yes, when Canal Studio acquired the license to the 2 films in the 60s, a small number of rolled posters for each film were found in the studio archive. So yes, even if you've got a folded poster, you haven't got a mint unrolled poster unless you've got one of those ones, making it harder for fans to get their complete Dalek history poster collection.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things we're looking at, we're running out of time, so I guess we'll go through these quicker. The Master's recent bargains. And again, it's one of those things where if you just look and you just time things better, you can get a bargain. You can see The Smugglers, which is one of the harder target books to get, which a lot of people need their collection. You can pay up to $100. And in fact, I've seen them go up to $300 Australian for that paperback. And this is sold, not what people have asked for it, which is absolutely crazy. If you look at the other option there, one went for $7. So if you're patient and you just watch the auctions and you are persistent, you can always get things cheaper. It is the harder way to do it, but it's worth it if you're saving, $90. And the other bargain there, I thought, was the hardback, which is not an ex-library book, which went for £40, and that is getting to be one of the more expensive hardbacks. So to get it for under $100 or around $100 is probably half or a quarter of what you can find or expect to pay for it these days for a non-ex library. You don't collect the hardbacks. A lot of people do, though.
Yeah, I've got some, but I don't actively collect them. I've only picked up the odd one here and there when I just happen to come across them, old library ones and stuff like that, and that's from years ago. So recent times, I know collectors who do get them. I know how much they are, and I know that there's no way I can afford them.
Yeah. And I think we've got one more thing. This is more up your alley. Do you know why that's an interesting version of Rose, the figure?
Not offhand, other than it's a very early one, isn't it?
It is. It was the version that was only available with the double remote control Dalek set, and they had sort of production quality issues where it didn't look great. And indeed, when Billie Piper herself saw this, she said, "We're not making any more Rose action figures ever again." So to get one for $3 on eBay is quite a good deal if you collect variants. And then we've got the comic strip companion, which is an amazing book. And again, if you wait for one to come up on eBay, you can get it for about half of what they are going for new. So just some tips: if you're looking for obscure stuff like that, you can always target the figure you're looking for and look for it over and over, and eventually you'll find one and hopefully get it for a reasonable price. And the same with the book as well.
Very good.
And we've still got a little bit to go, and we're running over time, so I apologize for that. The other thing the Master is pulling up from the archives is the Time Crash set from the San Diego Comic-Con in 2008. And this was an interesting set because at the time, Peter Davison's Doctor had come out, and they had only done a Doctor without a piece of celery. And then they decided to do a Time Crash set and give him a stick of celery, which caused a much commotion online because everyone's like, we can only get it from the con. So Character Options, to appease people on a forum, sold it through a forum, and it's been known as the UK 100. So one of the most limited sets ever available. But is it actually limited to 100 units? Do you know the answer to this, Greg?
No, well, that's a set that I never got, so I don't know much about it, really.
Well, when it was originally out, this was a misnomer. It was on the forum. It wasn't announced how many units there were, but on the forum, everyone said, well, if we just number how many we got, we can work out how many were sold. And there were about 100 accounted for on the forum where they sold them. So it became known as the UK 100. And tabloids in the UK often scan forums and saw this and picked up on it, and actually in print said it was the UK 100. But more and more people came forward and we got one. And said we got one. So it's more likely there were about 300-ish of them made, which still isn't a lot more than 100, but the UK 100 is a misnomer. And there are some posts I went back through the archive and pulled up where they said, I have heard they sold all 300 sets in 15 minutes. So at the time, it was known there were about 300 of them. And there weren't just the San Diego Comic Con ones. There were ones sold through Huene as well. So there were a few different ones, and ones donated for charity and signed as well. So if you've learned something today, if you thought you had one of 100, you probably haven't, but it's not terrible news because there weren't too many more. So we've run horribly over time, and I don't think we've got time for our final segment, which is the 60s in colour. So we'll hold that over for next week. We thank everyone for sitting through with us tonight. Did you want to add anything before we wrap up, mate?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, let's look at those coloured photos next week.
So thanks for being with us. It's been a very interesting week in Doctor Who, and I think things aren't going to slow down more. So come back next week for our final show for this series, and thanks for being with us tonight. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.